Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How are you doing? It is 2021, or at least I am going to pretend that it is, and you can pretend along with me by the time you hear this. January 1st, 2021. As I've differentiated before, it's not Joe Biden 2021 yet. It's still Donald Trump 2021. Later on, we'll forget that there was a Donald Trump 2021. But we do have to endure until the 20th, until we are supposedly officially rid of him. And I guess we'll see in the interim how much trouble he decides he can make, and how much trouble he decides he will ask people to make, and how much trouble actually gets made. I don't know. We're going to have to count down and see, but it's only the first day of January right now, and it's a Friday, and yeah, really, honestly, I should have taken the day off, but I don't know. I always feel bad about it, and, well, let's see. You can lay the blame for, if you want to call it blame, for doing a show on the pleadings of Rebecca Romans, who I disappointed on Christmas Day with the lack of a new show. And I had planned to do the same today. And quite honestly, I probably should have. And I don't even know whether I'm going to ask Scott to do a summary of today's show. It seems like he should have the day off on this too. I guess I've just sealed my fate now, having said that, because if I send him this tape and ask him to summarize it, he's going to quit on me. Or at least on this particular show anyway. And who knows? Maybe forever. I don't know. Anyway, I think maybe I'll wrap it up myself. At any rate, I felt like maybe I should go ahead and do it because there were so many stories that I didn't get to. And with having Ian join us yesterday after Greg's stint in the 9 o'clock hour, we covered a lot of great stuff, and I think we put together a great show. But then I realized, most of the way, I knew this was coming. There are a million little stories that I wanted to try and squeeze in by the end of the year. But because it's a Friday, I think this counts as the end of the year, even though it's actually technically the beginning of the year. So, I don't know. Let's go ahead. There are definitely a couple of things I wanted to catch up on, and now's as good a time as any to do it. As it turns out, I guess the update on the $2,000 checks thing is that right after the show ended yesterday, I guess the Senate actually voted. I guess I should check in on what the roll call vote actually was about, because there were some angry and frustrated messages being circulated after this vote. I guess they decided to actually move on to the NDAA veto override yesterday. This despite the fact that Bernie Sanders anyway. And I thought that this was happening. It was reported that it was happening with the assent of the Democratic caucus in the Senate, that he was filibustering the motion to proceed to consideration of the veto override, essentially in order to force a guarantee of a vote on a clean bill, the House version of the bill, for sending out $2,000 checks rather than $600 checks, and only if that were guaranteed would he either end the filibuster, or the implication was, would the rest of the Democratic caucus agree to go along and voting yes on cloture on the motion to proceed to the NDAA. And as it turns out, that's not what happened. And Democrats, in fact, did vote for cloture, most of them, on the motion to proceed. And so I'm not clear what the strategy actually was. They could have run out the clock on this thing and made a real spectacle of it. And I suppose there are those who would say, well, the reality of it is if you held up this veto override, you endanger the military budget, which many people would say, good, it's a great thing. But, bottom line being service members who are waiting for paychecks, and contractors, as little as you may be interested in supporting the cause of military contractors getting paid, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not an appropriations bill. It is an authorization bill. So there's no money actually in it. And not overriding the veto doesn't actually, it wouldn't shut down the government like it would with an appropriations bill. And it wouldn't terminate people's paychecks or anything like that. It's authorization for appropriations in the next fiscal year, I guess. Actually, we should take a look at the title of the bill, and that'll kind of help us with it. Let's see. So it was H.R. 6395 to authorize appropriations for fiscal year 2021, which has started already, of course. And so, I guess there's certainly some programs which could run into trouble where they would now say we're no longer an authorized program. And there are ways around it. And yes, you're not supposed to make appropriations for programs that are not authorized ahead of time, but they very frequently will go ahead and do it anyway. So, I don't know. It's not exactly the government shutdown type of situation. So they could have run out the clock on it and really ratcheted up the pressure. But I guess a lot of Democrats wanted to do the override, but then why give Bernie the go-ahead to do, well, I guess it's probably to say, well, keep Bernie Sanders happy, and he'll put himself in the position of filibustering, and then we'll vote to go ahead and do this responsible thing, and we'll get the best of both worlds somehow. But what about the $2,000 checks? Are they going to get those? I don't know. Maybe there was some kind of agreement with the Republican leadership to bring some version of a $2,000 check bill to the floor, but I don't know about it, and I wouldn't trust it. And I think that probably the right place to be was to say, no, there's only one thing we're interested in negotiating for, and it's a clean vote on the House bill, and that's simple, and we're not moving off of that position. But they did. So, a list of who voted how was being circulated, and there weren't a whole lot of no votes on the cloture motion from Democrats. There were 12 in total, and some of them are Republicans. Let's see. As a matter of fact, Senators Braun, does he say Brown or Braun? Cruz, Hawley, Kennedy, Lee, Rand Paul are the Republicans voting no on cloture. The Democratic no's on cloture are Markey, Merkley, Sanders, Van Hollen, Warren, and Wyden. Everybody else is either a yes or a not voting. There was, among the Democrats, Doug Jones wasn't present to vote. And are you interested in the Republicans? Blackburn, Cotton, Gardner, Graham, Loeffler, Perdue, and Rubio not present for the vote. But it was at 80 to 12 for cloture. So that wasn't close. They do technically have time to finish the bill. I don't know whether they're going to force every hour out of this thing or whether Bernie is any longer interested in it. Given that they can get to the vote technically, I don't know if there's any real reason to stand in the way. But if there's a question about the NDAA override vote itself being filibustered, well, McConnell could have filed for cloture yesterday, and then we would need today as the intervening day, then 12:01 a.m. on Saturday, just after midnight tonight, wink, wink, they could vote on cloture on the override vote. And then you have 30 hours of post-closure time you got to deal with. But it's now 12:01 on Saturday morning. That takes you to 24 hours, takes you to 12:01 Sunday morning. The remaining 6 hours takes you to 6:01 a.m. Sunday, January 3rd. That's real tight because the Congress, the 116th Congress, adjourns sine die by noon on the 3rd, on Sunday. But it's only 6 a.m. now. So they can, in fact, have the vote and pass the veto override if that's what happens, and get the job done. So I guess the question then falls to Bernie Sanders. Are you going to make them run the 30-hour clock from 12:01 a.m. on Saturday to 6 a.m. on Sunday, knowing that they have from 6 a.m. Sunday to 12 p.m. Sunday to hold that vote, and there's nothing you can do about it at that point? Or do you just say, fine, if there's nothing I can do about it, then just go and have the override vote at 12:01 on Saturday morning? Or I could just say, all right, I'm not going to filibuster the thing. There's no point in filibustering it. They will file cloture and succeed. So I'll get out of the way and let's just have the vote, right now. So we'll see. Maybe that question is already being answered as we speak, because I'm speaking to you from before today. You see, it's time travel. All right. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of get that one out of the way. I don't really know what what the deal was with planning this thing out, or with saying that Sanders was working with the tacit approval of the entire Senate Democratic caucus. I mean, they didn't disapprove of it, but they didn't back it with votes either. So, that's a little weird. I guess one other alternative strategy that I wanted to mention that doesn't really actually work, but was actually kind of funny, is the tweet from, let's see, who is this? Beth Lynch. That's the handles. Beth Lynch 2020. I don't know whether she's running for anything in 2020, but it's too late now. And she proposes the idea: everybody should send a $2,000 Venmo request to senator@mcconnell.senate.gov. And I think that's a fun activity. You probably won't get paid, but I think that's as good as emailing them and saying, we want you to have a vote on it. Send them a Venmo request. That'd be pretty funny. I'm in favor of that one. Good guerrilla activity out there. All right. Let's see. Other things that I wanted to catch up on. Here's some news that I only saw in between shows that I'll include for you now, because now is Friday and it's okay to do this because this came out after the Thursday show. You get the idea. Another time travel problem. The Huffington Post reported this one. This was well done in terms of just calming people's fears, or anticipating their fears and calming them. But you should be able to work this one out on your own, I think. But Sarah, what is it? Bobolts? Uh-oh. I'm not sure how she pronounces that one. We'll do the work for you. And you will see that it makes sense. And you too will not panic. All right. The news apparently underlying all of this is that a California nurse who got the first one of his 2 vaccine shots has contracted COVID-19 in between. And that's liable to make people panic and say, oh my God, the vaccine doesn't work. But that's not what it means. And as they put it here in the headline, no, it's not surprising that a California nurse would get COVID-19 after his first vaccine shot. And no, it's also not that the vaccine caused him to come down with coronavirus. That too, I think, a likely panic point where people would say, yeah, but a vaccine has the live virus in it, although they're supposed to be in weakened form, but maybe it wasn't weak enough, or his immune system was this, that, or the other thing, and he caught that's why I won't get the vaccine. But a reminder that that's not actually what they're doing. This is not like old-time inoculation where they give you a little bit of smallpox. It is a modern-day engineered vaccine, that doesn't contain live virus, doesn't contain dead virus. It contains only part of the genetic coding of the virus that's supposed to enable your body to recognize, to recognize the coronavirus and its protein spike, and it's, I guess, the mRNA instructions to build a fake protein spike that your body knows how to defeat before the live virus ever shows up and tries to use its proteins. But I can't explain all these things. But the point is that there's no actual virus in the vaccine, and that's not something that's an actual thing to worry about. So here's the news and the rest of the explanation. A nurse in San Diego is making headlines for testing positive for COVID-19 about a week after receiving a coronavirus vaccine shot. But in no way does this mean the vaccines don't work. To the contrary, doctors and public health experts expect things like this to happen to some people. Remember, what we're talking about here is a shot that, even when you get both shots, has 95% efficacy, which means that you can expect about 5% of people who get the shot and get both shots on time and everything to get coronavirus anyway. It's just that 95% of the people who might otherwise have gotten coronavirus anyway don't. And of course, if you get one shot, and we've learned along the way that it is about 50% efficacy, then it's still, after your first shot, 50-50 that if you are exposed to a pretty serious viral load of COVID-19, you might actually come down with COVID-19. The good news is it's only 50-50, because if you just stood in a cloud in the miasma of somebody else's COVID-19 exhalations and droplets and aerosols, you are probably going to get it. Now it's a coin toss, now that you've had one shot. But, sometimes you lose those coin tosses. So, emergency nurse Matthew W., identified only by his last initial, for whatever reason, preserve his privacy. I don't know whether anybody would feel compelled to attack this. How dare you get coronavirus or something like that. But whatever it is, we don't really want to cause any problems for this person. They're sick. Anyway, Matthew W. told local station ABC 10 News that he tested positive on December 26th, happy Boxing Day, after starting to feel sick on Christmas Eve with muscle aches, chills, and fatigue. Bad timing. The 45-year-old had received his first shot of Pfizer vaccine on December 18th, but his illness should not sound any alarm bells. Right? Why? Because both the vaccines approved for use in the United States so far, manufactured by Pfizer and Moderna, require a patient to get 2 shots, spaced a certain number of days apart. People getting the Pfizer vaccine, which he got, are supposed to wait apparently 21 days before getting the second jab. Neither the Pfizer nor the Moderna vaccine, of course, again, contain live virus, and they don't even contain a whole dead virus. Neither one can give you COVID-19, no matter what happens with it. Both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines work by giving the body instructions for how to make a harmless protein that is a distinguishing feature of the actual virus, so that when or if the vaccinated person gets exposed to the virus, the body already knows what to do to fight it off. You see, it already knows how to block that spike protein from infecting your cells. So, good news. Anyway, the drugs have been praised for their high efficacy rate, each around 95%, but that's only if you get both shots. After one shot, the available data suggests the Pfizer vaccine has about a 50% efficacy. Medical professionals use the term efficacy to describe the proportionate reduction in cases of COVID-19 among vaccinated people. The word is basically synonymous with effectiveness, although researchers will sometimes impose slightly different definitions. It's therefore likely that some people will contract COVID-19 between their first and second shots. And in that period, like Matthew W., they'll only have about a 50% reduced risk of becoming sick. It's also likely that some people will contract COVID-19 after the second shot because the vaccines do not offer 100% protection. So, okay. I think that really explains it about as well as it needs to be done, but just a good reminder of what it means. And I guess a good opportunity to segue to the question of what to do with the question of whether you should be reserving half of the vaccine doses that you have in order to guarantee that people who get their first shot will get a second shot in the right amount of time. And here, as with other things, Ron DeSantis governor of Florida has decided to freelance it and go his own way. And he certainly made a great deal of mistakes in doing that. But I guess here in his insistence that they should use up all the doses that they have and give everybody as many first doses as possible and just wait for resupply and rely on resupply coming quickly enough that they can get people their second doses on time might not actually be a bad strategy. And I guess the Canadians ran the number, and it sounds like it's going to be official, policy for the Canadian government and their nationalized health system to do just that. I've got a subscription-only piece from the Globe and Mail, I think, that describes it. And I don't know, if you're a subscriber, you can get a hold of it, and maybe you can come on and read it to us. But the headline tells the story. New data favor administering COVID-19 vaccines as fast as possible and not reserving doses. They did the math, and I guess essentially, even if those second doses don't show up, you still are you're still giving everybody 50% efficacy with the vaccine, right? So every exposure that would previously have given, somewhere in the neighborhood of 100% chance of spreading infection now has only a 50% chance of spreading infection. That should cut down on the transmission rate, and that should help take us out, help anyway, a little bit at least, to ease us out of pandemic situations and keep the growth rate down. And especially if you're vaccinating the most vulnerable, either to serious cases of COVID-19 that might cause you to die, or the most likely transmissions, as that might be the case among healthcare workers, who are constantly exposed to the virus. If you're cutting down on the places where the virus is experiencing the most transmission, yes, I got it right the first time, then you're doing well by your society at large. The transmission numbers drop, and you begin to get things back under control. And if you can get them the second dose, so much the better. So Ron DeSantis might not have been completely in the wrong on that one. That he would then take it and give it out first come, first serve. Even that isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world, though it goes counter to the planning and strategy. But the real problem is that it creates panic situations and forces people to do dumb things like congregate in what could become super spreader events, waiting online in the cold. In some cases, it's not that cold, I guess, in Florida, but unhealthy situation, certainly for the elderly and frail who are hoping to get these vaccines, to have to sit outside and wait on stuff like this. So anyway, I guess it's not the worst mistake in the world, and I wanted to bring that to everyone's attention, that it could actually work out okay. So that, and also good news, or no reason to panic on the clickbait type of story about people who got their first vaccine dose and then got COVID anyway. Let's see. One other thing that I can throw in here probably before our break. Something I've been watching and wondering about for a little while now, since I've been doing the nightly updates on the COVID-19 pandemic statistics, both here at home and around the world. So here is the tweet thread. It's a short tweet thread initially from Dr. Atul Gawande, who is a surgeon, although where I am not sure, but he's certainly of Indian heritage and connected to what's going on in India. He may also be on the ground in India. I'm not entirely sure. But he puts it this way. India was on a trajectory to have the worst COVID epidemic in the world. You would think so. I mean, enormous population and some serious population density in some of their cities, and COVID did catch on relatively early there. And there was a while during the middle months of the pandemic where India was posting daily new case numbers higher than the United States. It was the only country posting higher numbers on a daily basis than the United States. And it was for some time. It was an extended period. And then they began to drop back down, or maybe they didn't even drop that back much further down as the United States started to pick up the pace. But anyway, the point is that this didn't come to pass. And that although India is having tremendous problems with the virus and is the second, has the second highest case counts of any country around the world, they are looking at about half the number of reported cases that the United States has got, but with more than 1 billion more people than the United States has got. The United States population, 331 million, nearing 332 million. The population of India, 1,386,000,000. So even without the 1 billion on top, they are larger than the United States, but with half the number of reported cases of COVID-19. So, it leads you to wonder what they might be doing there, and whether it is something that they're doing that's keeping the numbers down, or whether it is something that they're perhaps not reporting. Which one is it? And I guess Atul is interested in it too. Dr. Atul, to you. Thank you very much. And so the question is posed here. India was on a trajectory to have the worst COVID-19 epidemic in the world, but with far less resources for combating COVID than the US or Europe. It has turned the tide with a determined focus on masks. And an accompanying article here that I don't think I'll be able to open from the Wall Street Journal. COVID-19 was consuming India until nearly everyone started wearing masks. And at least the start of the article is available to me. But Dr. Gawande continues here. We'll pick it up after the break and read you the rest of it. It's just one other tweet, but then reaction to the tweet as well. Very interesting. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday. But our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Yes, where we left off was with Dr. Atul Gawande's tweet about this Wall Street Journal article that seems to indicate that widespread acceptance of masking in India is what saved them from certain COVID-19 doom. He continues on with a second tweet, which I think is a quote from the Wall Street Journal article, along with a chart that was included in it. Indians have embraced masks thanks to a combination of factors, including a healthy fear of the virus among the public, a unified voice from authorities, billions of automated phone messages, and hundreds of thousands of masking violation tickets. And this is the result, this chart, which is then displayed titled New Confirmed Cases of COVID-19 in the United States, European Union, and India. And guess what? It shows large increases or continuing increases with fluctuations in the United States and in the European Union. But a peak in mid-September for India, whereafter everyone else began climbing even more. India starts its downturn, having passed its peak. So, good news at the very least. Now, interesting, there's reaction, I guess, from others interested in events on the ground in India. Others of, apparently, if their names are any indication, who are Indian as well. Vinay Aravind making the observation, Atul, I've read your books and I'm a fan, but I'd urge you to speak to your friends and family in India, which I guess means he's elsewhere, to ask about mask compliance here before boosting this story that the writer appears to have made out of whole cloth. That would be disappointing, wouldn't you think? On the other hand, response here from Meenakshi Ravi, who says, hey, Vinay, I read the article when Atul tweeted it, and I checked with family in India, and some parts seemed to hold. Certainly not the line about Modi wearing masks. I've seen recent videos with a maskless Modi. That probably shouldn't surprise anybody, but let's see. So there's a lot of back and forth here. So she continues here. So much of India's COVID response has been deeply problematic, not the least the lockdown with 4 hours notice. But from my perspective here in the UK, where the numbers are crazy, I'm impressed by some elements of the effort in India. Vinay responds, yes, but mask compliance is not even anywhere close to widespread. Forget universal. This is a fact-free premise. On the streets, maybe 30 to 40% of people are wearing masks in the cities at best, and outside the cities, I hear the proportion's even lower. Could be. Very interesting. Let's see. Anybody else here? Another observation saying, let's see, from Here Dreams Sharon. How about that as a handle? Look at the Western numbers and look at the Indian numbers. Deaths per million and critically ill are less in India versus the West. That proves so much. I guess in villages, masks may not be required as numbers and density is low compared to cities like Mumbai and Delhi. So, interesting back and forth about this. The Wall Street Journal article, well, I'm not certain how much of it we're supposed to take as gospel here, but whatever's happening, somebody ought to get to the bottom of what's happening in India, because there's no other real explanation for how they've been able to suppress the spread of the virus, given the size of their population and the size of the initial infections in the cities. There's really no other explanation that I can think of for it, but, hey, that's not my job. But maybe the rest of you have some idea or have come across a source that might help explain it, or you've got a theory of your own. All right, moving on, just to hit a couple of other subjects here. And again, no particular order. This is just how they happen to have landed in pocket. This was an interesting one. Axios reporting this, and, they're a headline and Twitter-focused outlet. So I'm not sure how in-depth they went, but I was surprised to see no mention of this. Although it seems like the headline and tweets that I saw about the story were designed to elicit everyone's memory of this happening before. The headline on it, Scoop. Trump administration declassifies unconfirmed intel. That's bad news already. On Chinese bounties. Yes, bounties. Jonathan Swan on this one. Also Bethany Allen. Ebrahimian. Bethany Allen Ebrahimian, the co-author on this piece with Jonathan Swan. So what's the news? The Trump administration is declassifying as yet uncorroborated intelligence. Again, that's a problem by itself. Recently briefed to President Trump that indicates China offered to pay non-state actors in Afghanistan to attack American soldiers, two senior administration officials tell Axios. And of course, well, that's meant, I think, to elicit memories of the Russians allegedly having done the same thing, and eliciting no response whatsoever from Donald Trump. Now, if it's even to be believed that he was, in fact, briefed with information that would indicate that the Chinese were doing the same thing, or I suppose that they were the ones behind the first one, it's odd that he reacts in this way in particular, that I'm going to declassify this uncorroborated intelligence, which is not smart, to prove my point and to also prove my ongoing vendetta against China. But, in service, almost, how could it be viewed otherwise? It's in service of the Russians, he has nothing to say. Now this is actionable intelligence, that there's a rumor that the Chinese are doing it, but it's not a problem when the Russians are doing it. I mean, Bounties are bounties. All right. Well, their next section here, the big picture, says the disclosure of this unconfirmed intelligence comes 21 days before the end of Trump's presidency, after he has vowed to ratchet up pressure on China, and months after news reports indicated that the Russians had secretly offered bounties for Taliban militants to kill U.S. troops in Afghanistan. The Chinese embassy in D.C. didn't respond to a request for comment. Trump is not believed to have discussed the matter with President Xi Jinping. Trying my best on the pronunciation here. Don't know whether he's going to offer him any more chocolate cake or what. It was not immediately clear whether any members of Congress or President-elect Joe Biden had been briefed on this, although Biden now has access to the president's daily brief, allegedly, the PDB. Behind the scenes, what's going on? The intelligence was included in the president's briefing on December 17th, and Trump was verbally briefed on the matter by National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, officials said. I guess that's sort of their roundabout way of saying, we wrote it down for him on December 17th, but then Robert O'Brien told him what it was at some later date because, he's not going to read the thing you gave him. Administration officials across multiple agencies are currently working to corroborate the initial intelligence reports. Axios was not able to visually inspect any reports detailing the intelligence. A summary was described by phone by the officials. Why it matters? Well, come on. If this intelligence were to be confirmed, it would represent a dramatic strategic shift for China and sharply escalate tensions between China and the U.S. If the intelligence does not prove accurate, it raises questions about the motivations of the source behind it, as well as the decision to declassify it. And I gotta tell you, I think that's where we are. I don't know. I can't think of anything that China, any way that China benefits from doing this. Particularly because the groundwork has already been laid for believing something like that might happen because of at least the rumors that Russia was doing so. The only thing I can think of that argues in favor of this intelligence being correct is China saying, well, what the hell? The Russians did it and didn't get punished for it. Maybe we won't either. Although, why would they believe that? Anyway, China has long played a quiet diplomatic role in Afghanistan, inviting Afghan Taliban officials to Beijing to discuss plans for a peace deal and encouraging an Afghan-led solution, though Chinese-made weapons and financing have at times also flowed into the conflict there. It seems incongruous, and that's enclosed in quotes there, incongruous that China would take such a provocative action in Afghanistan. Andrew Small, a senior fellow at the German Marshall Fund, who specializes in China-Afghanistan affairs, told Axios, pursuing peace in Afghanistan is, quote, one of the extremely rare areas where the U.S. and China still have a willingness to work together on an area of importance, Small said. They know the drawdown is taking place. We're not in the context where anything else needs to happen to U.S. troops in Afghanistan. There is no reason to create additional pressure on U.S. forces. Then they offer us a flashback. In June, White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany lashed out at the New York Times for publishing, quote, unverified allegations about the Russian bounty intelligence. She suggested rogue intelligence officers were undermining Trump and U.S. security. She also insisted Trump hadn't been briefed because the intelligence hadn't been fully verified. So I guess that explanation no longer operative, as he is now sharing and seeking to declassify unverified information about China, or that purports to be about China anyway. More here in the details. One senior official involved in the latest China discussions who described the uncorroborated intelligence to Axios said, like all first reports, we react with caution to initial reports, but any intel reports relating to the safety of our forces we take very seriously. On December 22nd, officials held a policy coordinating committee meeting to discuss the matter, said a second senior official with direct knowledge of the internal discussions. The official said the PCC was focused on two objectives: consultation with the IC, intelligence community, of course, on attempts to verify initial reports, and consultation in the intelligence and defense communities around the force protection posture for remaining forces in Afghanistan. Officials would not describe the source or sources of the intelligence or say when or over what period of time the activity occurred. One said, the U.S. has evidence that the People's Republic of China, they abbreviate here PRC, attempted to finance attacks on American servicemen by Afghan non-state actors by offering financial incentives or bounties, and said the National Security Council is coordinating the whole of government investigation. He would not say whether he was referring to the Taliban or go beyond the descriptor of non-state actors. The timing of the alleged bounty offer is unclear. The source would only say that this happened sometime after late February when the U.S. struck its deal with the Taliban. He also noted that there had not been an American combat death in Afghanistan since. He said the administration received earlier intelligence about PRC weapons illicitly flowing into Afghanistan. Next, the Between the Lines section. The British and U.S. governments have previously complained about Chinese-made weapons being used by the Taliban. The interest in Afghanistan stems in part from Beijing's desire to prevent Chinese Muslim separatist groups from using the country as a base. They do, in fact, share a border way up in the north of Afghanistan. Afghan security officials recently discovered an alleged Chinese spy ring operating in the country, apparently seeking to target Uyghurs there, according to a December 25th report from the Hindustan Times. Don't forget, they add in this last section, Trump received heavy criticism earlier this year when he admitted that he had not addressed with Vladimir Putin the unconfirmed intelligence reports that Russia had been offering bribes to the Taliban to kill American soldiers. The commander of U.S. forces in Afghanistan, General Frank McKenzie, said in September that, quote, it just has not been proved to a level of certainty that satisfies me, unquote, that Russia offered these bounties. This information was included in the PDB earlier in the year, the New York Times first reported. We continue to look for that evidence, McKenzie said of the reports on Russia. I just haven't seen it yet, but it's not a closed issue. And that's the end of the quote and the end of the article. But interesting that Trump would react this way. It seems a little too convenient in the timing things to close out the administration this way and to get one more shot on China. Remember, of course, even in his stupid lie video promising everybody Regeneron, he said China would pay a big price, and have yet to see that happen. And maybe he just sort of realized that on the way out the door and thought he could pull something off. Let's see. How about this one, since Russia was mentioned? And we were earlier talking about these statistics on COVID-19, wondering why it was that India was reporting or was able to report these declining numbers. And I did hint at the possibility that maybe they weren't telling the entire truth, but there's nothing in the story that I was able to see, and the part of it I was able to see anyway, that hints that that's the case. But instead, there's this from The Guardian. Let me open this up here. Russia, also no surprise here, Russia admits to world's third worst COVID-19 death toll. And that's a surprise, of course, because the current third worst death toll would be India, the way it runs at the moment. USA, with our total over 351,000, according to Worldometers. Brazil next at 194,000. India at 148,000, going on 149,000. Then Mexico, Italy, UK, France, and Russia at number 8 with 57,000 reported deaths. And I've suspected for a while that Russia has been restricting its reporting. Well, you know, they're Russia, and they kind of have a history with that. And I didn't necessarily think that they were uniquely suited to hosting the virus in any way that anyone else wasn't. It was possible, but they had strangely consistent numbers, I will say that, both for new cases and for deaths. Anyway, now they admit that many more are in fact dead. The Worldometers, they're copping to 57,000. The Guardian says more than 186,000 have actually died due to coronavirus, 3 times more than previously reported. 186,000 would in fact put them in between Brazil in second place and India currently sitting in third. So let's see. You won't be able to read through the whole thing because The Guardian is a subscription paper, but I think we got the gist of it there. And we'll see whether it holds up and whether there's any further confirmation or whether any further confirmation is needed. It's being confirmed here by Russian Deputy Prime Minister Tatiana Golikova, who says, and according to the caption of her picture here, 81% increase in the mortality from January to November. And that a lot of that comes from, I guess that's total deaths, but that a tremendous number of that comes, of course, from coronavirus. So, all right, I don't know what their specific motivation may have been to keep the numbers down, but, well, I don't know whether any other watchers, statistics watchers like me, likewise thought that was probably the case, but I guess now we could consider it confirmed. Let's throw in one more COVID-19 curveball, I guess, before we take our next break. We'll go for this to The Intercept, where Peter Moss has this piece under this headline, Hiding COVID-19, How the Trump Administration Suppresses Photography of the Pandemic. It's an interesting angle on it, and I had wondered about this. The U.S. government, the subheader says, has reinforced media restrictions at hospitals, reducing the flow of disturbing images of the pandemic. And we've discussed in the past in a number of instances between not just COVID-19, but others, that sometimes the photos are what help solidify the story in the public mind. And, well, we still have some work to do in solidifying the story in the public mind here, don't we? Let's read the Peter Moss reporting here. As COVID-19 tore through the United States in the spring, a senior official in the Trump administration quietly reinforced a set of guidelines that prevented journalists from getting inside all but a handful of hospitals at the front line of the pandemic. The guidelines, citing the medical privacy law known as HIPAA, suggested a nearly impossible standard. Before letting journalists inside COVID-19 wards, hospitals needed prior permission from not only the specific patients the journalists would interview, but also other patients whose names or identities would be accessible. The onerous guidelines were issued on May 5th by Roger Severino, who worked at the Conservative Heritage Foundation before Donald Trump appointed him to direct the Office for Civil Rights at the Department of Health and Human Services. The guidelines made it extremely difficult for hospitals to give photographers the opportunity to collect visual evidence of the pandemic's severity. By tightening the circulation of disturbing images, the guidelines fulfilled, intentionally or not, a key Trump administration goal, keeping public attention away from the death toll, which has, at the moment of reporting here anyway, surpassed 300,000 souls. It has surpassed 350,000 in fact, but this is not a very old article either. It's in fact dated December 27th, but who knows when the writing was going on, and being cautious, they kept it at 300,000 for this piece. The last thing hospital patients need to worry about during the COVID-19 crisis is a film crew walking around their bed shooting B-roll, Severino said dismissively in a short press release accompanying the guidelines. In the pandemic's early days, when hospitals were first inundated with media requests, the prevailing HIPAA guidelines were quite restrictive, even on matters that had nothing to do with media access. Those guidelines predated the Trump administration and were not written for pandemics, but the scale of the COVID-19 crisis quickly forced the Trump administration to loosen a wide range of privacy restrictions on medical providers, except, as it turned out, the ones that kept Americans from viscerally seeing the ailing and the dying. For instance, HHS allowed hospitals to share COVID-19 information with first responders and with organizations involved in COVID-19 testing. Hospitals were told that they would not face sanctions for sharing information with the families or friends of COVID-19 patients. Doctors were freed to discuss or transfer patient information with technologies that were not secure, such as email, FaceTime, and Skype. And as it relaxed these restrictions, the agency said that the medical providers would not be punished for breaches of patient confidentiality if they acted in good faith during the pandemic. The government's permissiveness did not extend to journalists. The media guidelines announced by Severino in May reinforced HIPAA's restrictions and warned hospitals that violations could bring fines in the millions of dollars. The announcement was not reported by general interest publications, but news outlets for the healthcare industry noticed what had happened. The headline of one of those industry stories was blunt: "Patient privacy prevails over COVID-19 media coverage." Severino's guidance, little known outside the healthcare industry, may help solve one of the mysteries of the pandemic. Why have Americans seen relatively little imagery of people suffering from COVID-19? While there is a long-running debate over the influence of disturbing images of death and dying, whether they actually move public opinion, the relative paucity of videos and photographs of the pandemic's victims might help explain why COVID-19 skepticism has thrived as the death toll in America reaches the level of a 9/11 every day. For society to respond in ways commensurate with the importance of this pandemic, we have to see it, wrote art historian Sarah Elizabeth Lewis. For us to be transformed by it, it has to penetrate our hearts as well as our minds. Images force us to contend with the unspeakable. They help humanize clinical statistics and make them comprehensible. From the moment COVID-19 took hold, journalists in the United States experienced immense difficulty getting access to what amounts to ground zero of the emergency. This was not because they were not trying. They deluged hospitals with requests to document what was happening. Nor was it because doctors and nurses resisted. They clamored for more attention to the agonies endured by the patients. With infrequent exceptions, hospitals said no to the requests from journalists, often without explanation. Lucas Jackson, senior photographer for Reuters, recalls that at the start of the pandemic in March, he worked with a team at Reuters that called nearly every hospital and trauma ward in New York City. They created a spreadsheet of the hospitals and whether they had been contacted and what their response was. Only a few responded and none granted access, even though Reuters offered Guantanamo levels of control to hospital staff. Interesting way of putting it there. Agreeing to get releases from patients and allowing hospital staff to look at all photographs to make sure no names or identities were disclosed. If that's what it takes, we were willing to do it, Jackson told The Intercept. Michael Camber, the former war photographer who directs the Bronx Documentary Center in New York City, recalls security guards shooing him off the sidewalks in front of Lincoln Medical Center. This is the greatest loss of life on the American continent in such a concentrated time, and we're seeing almost no images that really convey the devastation and the death, Camber said. Absolutely true. And by the way, I've been watching the death numbers and comparing them to things that are universally recognized as mass death incidents, and it is rather remarkable when they say in a concentrated amount of time, in 10 months or so, 9 months so far of the pandemic. I don't know. I think I've probably mentioned it on the air. There are more Americans have died of COVID-19 in 9 months than were killed in combat in all 4 years of World War II. I know I've made mention of that before. We're now beyond World War II and World War I combined in terms of the losses, and we, will very shortly. It's estimated with January estimated to be the deadliest month so far, and possibly 100,000 more losses to come in the month of January, bringing us to 450,000, nearly 500,000, of course. But yet you're talking about more people dying in 10 months here on American soil than were killed in all U.S. military engagements from World War I forward. 100 years of military operations didn't produce this many combat deaths. It's really crazy. Let me pick back up with the story here. Photography has played such a key role in the civil rights movement, in ending the Vietnam War, and in any number of key moments in American history, and it just seems missing in action on this crisis. This, of course, was Michael Camber, who we quoted earlier. Camber, like other photographers, accepts that safety and privacy concerns need to be upheld, but he believes that those concerns are used as excuses for the repression of journalism that is manifestly in the public interest. In the cases in which hospitals have allowed journalists inside during the pandemic, there have been no privacy breaches, which proves that reporters can work at the medical front line without violating patient privacy. The government and nearly all healthcare facilities have banded together in the name of protecting the privacy of the sick and have done an excellent job of keeping photographers as far away from the grief and devastation as possible, Camber said. There have been exceptions, of course. John Moore, an award-winning photographer for Getty Images, got inside a Connecticut hospital in the early days of the pandemic. A contact with connections at the hospital vouched for Moore, removing the obstacles that were keeping others out. Even so, Moore had just one visit to the intensive care unit, working in a hurry, with a communications official carrying a stack of releases that everyone he came into contact with had to sign. Moore did not take pictures of patients' faces. We established ground rules ahead of time, and I stuck to those, he said. Getty Images is a major photo agency that has worked hard to get its photographers into hospitals with only rare success. For every 1,000 calls or emails, you get maybe 3 yeses, said Sandy Sirich, the agency's director of photography. Sometimes we even had the CEO say, "This is great, yes, we want coverage," and then someone tells them no, and they change their mind. I'm sure the lawyers were on it. The exceptions demonstrate that not all the blame can be placed on the government. There is enough wiggle room in the regulations for determined hospitals to let journalists inside and trust them to follow the rules. Journalists who spoke with The Intercept noted a similarity to embeds with the U.S. military. Just as embedded war reporters were privy to sensitive information that they were trusted to keep to themselves, journalists and hospitals can be counted on not to publish patient information that they are not supposed to publish. We'll continue with this after this. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Continuing with this Intercept article from Peter Moss about photography at least in the initial days of the pandemic, and I guess continuing till this point, inside hospitals. Where are those photographs? Why aren't we seeing them? A photographer who got access to several hospitals in the early months of the pandemic expressed quiet fury that most medical facilities in the country chose to keep their doors closed. "I was not happy that I had a scoop," said the photographer, who asked that their name not be used in order to protect the ability and their employer's ability to continue to work inside hospitals. "I was not happy that I had exclusive access. I felt that all my colleagues should have had the same access I had. The dearth of images of death and dying directly contributed to the disinformation about COVID-19 and the ongoing disbelief in our country. Full stop." And the hospitals have to answer for that. The hospitals bear some responsibility, although I guess the effort here is to show how much of that might have been at the behest of the Trump administration. The war metaphor sheds light on why 300,000 coronavirus deaths have elicited a shallower national response than the loss of life in previous catastrophes. Domestic opposition to the war in Vietnam was shaped by imagery of U.S. soldiers as well as Vietnamese civilians in agonizing moments of injury or death. Americans were horrified to see the true face of war. Having learned its lesson, the U.S. government suppressed imagery of American casualties in Iraq and Afghanistan. The Embed program aimed at preventing journalists from roaming around battlefields on their own, taking pictures of whatever they wanted. Eerily, the Embed guidelines used by the Pentagon included a prior consent clause similar to what HIPAA demands. The guidelines prohibited war journalists from publishing pictures or videos of wounded soldiers unless they had prior written permission from the soldiers, which is a practical impossibility on the battlefield. Names, video, identifiable written or oral descriptions of identifiable photographs of wounded service members will not be released without the service member's prior written consent. The guidelines also enforce the ban on photography of the dead. Images clearly identifying individuals killed in action will not be released. The unifying principle between repressing photography of a war and photography of a pandemic is that a population that cannot see human carnage will not object as strongly to its perpetuation and will not care as much about the incompetence that brought it on. Hospitals and nursing homes may not have the mendacious intent of the U.S. military, but their actions have a similar effect of making it nearly impossible for ordinary Americans to be confronted with visual evidence of the true cost of the calamity that's unfolding. The Intercept reached out to a number of hospitals to ask about their media policies, including Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles, Mount Sinai in New York City, all the Sinais, I guess, and Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. The only one that responded was Massachusetts General in Boston, which provided the following statement. MGH has been restricting outside photographers from working in areas of the hospital where staff care for COVID patients. This is for both the privacy of our patients and also for their safety and that of our staff. Throughout the pandemic, the hospital has taken careful steps to minimize the amount of people coming to campus to ensure that only those essential for patient care and hospital operations are working in the building. While we recognize the importance of telling the story of how this pandemic has affected our patients and staff, our top priorities must always be privacy and safety. Our team has taken additional steps to make our experts, caregivers, and consenting patients available to journalists remotely, as well as images and videos captured by our staff photographers. As the daily death toll reaches shocking new highs, there continues to be relatively little photography of patients in hospitals. The Intercept reviewed the front pages of the New York Times and the Los Angeles Times for the past month and found no photos of hospital patients on all but a few days. When there is photography from inside hospitals, it is almost always of doctors and nurses. The pandemic certainly gets its share of visual coverage, but the pictures tend to be surrogates of suffering, such as people wearing masks as they wait for COVID-19 tests or go about their daily routines. Because it doesn't happen often, when a powerful photo from inside a hospital happens to emerge, such as Go Nakamura's photo of a doctor embracing a COVID-19 patient last month, it gets an enormous amount of attention. Events on this scale are understood through abstractions, which is necessary and likely helpful in terms of psychological defenses, but it also results in a disconnect between people who experience it firsthand and those who do not, noted Dr. Elizabeth May, a psychiatry resident at a hospital in New York City. As a physician, I wish that those close to me could really picture and see what I have seen, that I could know that they have seen this and not feel like I need to protect their abstractions when what I really need is their support and empathy. Willingly or not, some hospitals have turned themselves into apparatuses of silence, and staff inside them are upset. In April, when the first surge of pandemic decimated New York City, a nurse at Lincoln Hospital shared video footage of herself and other staff describing the difficulty of treating COVID-19 patients without adequate protective gear or life-saving supplies. The video was published by The Intercept, and shortly afterward, the nurse, Lillian Udell, was informed by the hospital that she was being investigated for HIPAA violations. That prompted another nurse at the hospital, Kelly Cabrera, to speak out. HIPAA is kind of being used to gag people, she told The Intercept's Akela Lacey. We're all experiencing the most difficult working conditions we've ever faced, and everybody who is speaking out is doing so to advocate for patients, ultimately. It looks like hospital administrations tend to run to HIPAA for their protection, not so much for patient protection. May, the psychiatry resident, noted how some hospitals, even in a pandemic, are reluctant to show what happens behind their doors. Hospitals, as businesses, are profit-driven entities, as profit-driven entities, do not want to be associated with death and suffering. It is very off-brand for them, I think, said May. So emerges an unfortunate dovetailing of HIPAA as a safeguard for civil rights and HIPAA as a vehicle for hiding off-brand aspects of medicine. As a psychiatrist, I find myself thinking about shame and what role institutional shame has to play in the hiding of death and suffering. Dr. Elizabeth Poorman, a physician in Seattle, was particularly blunt on social media. Americans do not respond to statistics, she wrote on Twitter in June. They respond to stories. Every hospital needs to let cameras in and show what dying of COVID looks like. Instead, PR departments silence us. Responding to a commenter who said HIPAA was silencing the hospitals, Poorman shot back, "No, HIPAA is the excuse." Earlier this month, she told The Intercept, "I don't really see things changing because people don't want to think creatively about this." When HIPAA was passed in 1996, the law did not include media guidelines. That changed after hospitals, seeking to increase their profiles and their revenues, opened their doors to reality TV shows. In 2012, one of those shows, NY Med, I don't know whether we said it as New York Med, but it's written as just as NY Med, which starred Dr. Mehmet Oz, broadcasted an episode that featured a blurred-out patient in the emergency room who had been hit by a sanitation truck. The patient died, and when the episode aired, his widow happened to be watching and recognized her late husband's voice. She was shocked. Neither she nor anyone in her family had given permission for her husband's last moments to be filmed. 4 years later, New York Presbyterian Hospital agreed to pay a $2.2 million fine. HHS also announced strict new guidelines that required, before journalists could enter any patient area, prior written authorization from each individual who is or will be in the area or whose PHI, protected health information, otherwise will be accessible to the media. These guidelines in 2016 spelled the end of reality TV shows about hospitals, not so bad, and unfortunately turned them into no-go zones for reporters who, unlike reality TV crews, could be trusted to behave responsibly. It is herein posited. Severino, choosing to reinforce rather than relax the 2016 guidelines, was unequivocal in May. The COVID-19 public health emergency does not alter the HIPAA privacy rules' existing restrictions on disclosures of protected health information to the media, his guidelines stated, which on the surface is a defensible position at first anyway. As explained in prior guidance, HIPAA does not permit covered healthcare providers to give the media, including film crews, access to any areas of their facilities where patients' PHI will be accessible in any form, e.g., written, electronic, oral, or other visual or audio form, without first obtaining a written HIPAA authorization from each patient whose PHI would be accessible to the media, the italics there in Severino's guidance. Severino declined an interview request from The Intercept, but his office released a short statement in his name that said his decision to relax some HIPAA guidelines can help save lives during the pandemic. Seems true. His statement justified the reinforced media restrictions by saying that hospitals allowing camera crews to film COVID-19 patients in distress without their permission is a breach of trust that violates patients' privacy rights. Also defensible, I think. But this ignores the fact that the lessons of 2012 have been learned. Nobody is proposing to broadcast videos or photos of non-consenting patients. In essence, Severino is all but barring journalists from hospitals because he says they will do something that they pledge that they will not do and that hospitals would not permit them to do. Adam Green, an expert on HIPAA and a partner at the law firm Davis Wright Tremaine, said it comes down to the amount of legal risk a hospital is willing to assume and the amount of time it is willing to devote to figuring that out. A hospital has to wade through a lot of regulatory questions before deciding to let a journalist inside, and that means tapping into legal resources that might be scarce or expensive. And if a decision is made to grant access, there's always a chance that something could go wrong and a privacy breach could happen. When you look at the incentives for hospitals, it is much easier to decline the request and avoid any risk of penalty, Green said. That seems true. There's not much in it for them to spend the time and resources to navigate HIPAA to find a way to do this. That's the conclusion of the article. I think it's certainly true. But yeah, I'm struck by the defensibility of Severino's positions, at least initially, though I'm open to saying that there maybe is some balancing to be done here such that we can conduct some kind of a public awareness campaign, even at this late date. But none of the restrictions that were put in place initially, even when read alongside the loosening of restrictions in the early months, seem terribly problematic or hypocritical to me. Now, the after effects were such that they certainly inured to the benefit of the administration in suppressing the severity of the story, and that may have been the initial motivation in it. And it's easier to believe that than to believe that a Trump administration official was overly concerned with, the rights of thousands of the hoi polloi who would be dying from COVID-19, not like us cool people who get Regeneron and survive, for instance. But, they would have an awfully hard time proving it. And really, quite honestly, I don't know that Peter Maas even did a great job making his case with this one. It's a tenuous case, I think, at best. But one worth noting, so I think it was well worth the time given over to noting it for the record. Duly noted, and moving on. Okay, how about an update on the antics upcoming for January 6th? I know we'll have time to deal with that a little bit, and I'm sure we'll go over some of what we discuss here today, but I'll give you the weekend to think it over. More Republicans signing up to register their objections. I don't know how many of them will actually speak on the floor or make their objections during the joint session. But several dozen, I guess, House members have decided to sign on to this thing. But, we heard just the other day that Josh Hawley now declares his intention to sign on to the effort, probably along with, are we now calling him Tom Tuberville? Maybe Ron Johnson, though Armando mentioned that maybe he was backing off of that position. I don't know. There's a long list here of Republican House members who appear intent on raising their objections. And I guess that means, in practical terms, that they will probably have nothing to say, but will sign the various written objections that will be put forward. So let's see if we can just run through. I mean, there's a bunch of them here. I don't know what order they're in here. Is it alphabetical? Yeah, it looks like it is. Brian Babin, Babin, I don't know, from Texas. Andy Biggs of Arizona, we've mentioned him before. Here's the QAnon crazy lady from Shooter's Restaurant in Colorado, Lauren Boebert. Mo Brooks, who was the first one out of the box saying he would object. Ted Budd of North Carolina. Representative-elect Jerry Carl of Alabama. And Representative-elect Madison Cawthorn, the jackass from North Carolina. That was to be expected. Another representatives-elect here, Andrew Clyde of Georgia and Byron Donalds of Florida. So a good preview of who's going to be crazy in the next upcoming House session. Jeff Duncan of South Carolina, Matt Gaetz of Florida, Louis Gohmert, of course, of Texas, Representative-elect Bob Good of Virginia, Lance Gooden of Texas, Paul Gosar, the dentist whose family hates him, from Arizona, Mark Green of Tennessee, Representative-elect Diana Harshbarger, I don't know, from Tennessee, Representative-elect Yvette Harrell, Herrell of New Mexico. So quite a freshman class coming in here on this one. Jody Heiss of Georgia, Clay Higgins of Louisiana, Representative-elect Ronnie Jackson, Dr. Ronnie Jackson of Texas. He's going to object 239 pounds worth of objection there. John Joyce of Pennsylvania, Fred Keller of Pennsylvania, Mike Kelly of Pennsylvania, whose lawsuits failed all this time, right? Dan Muser, I guess is pronunciation, also of Pennsylvania. Representative-elect Barry Moore of Alabama. Ralph Norman of South Carolina. Representative-elect Burgess Owens of Utah. Scott Perry of Pennsylvania. Guy Reschenthaler of Pennsylvania. Lloyd Smucker of Pennsylvania. With a name like Smucker's, his objection's got to be good, right? And, QAnon loon Marjorie Taylor Greene, representative-elect from Georgia, will also be objecting. G.T. Thompson of Pennsylvania, and Jefferson, he's now going by Jefferson, Jeff/Jefferson Van Drew of New Jersey. It's a long haul from entering Congress as a Democrat. Okay, so that's the update on who plans to help initiate the objections. Another point I've been discussing in the past about this, the tellers, and who will be reading the certificates, and will any of them be handed the certificates of any of the counterfeit certificates from any of the states that sent so-called alternative slates of electors. I don't see any way for those things to get to the floor unless, assuming they mailed them the way the real ones are supposed to be mailed, unless somebody in the mailroom is given direction to say, yes, hand these to the vice president on January 6th and let the games begin. I don't see how it gets to the hands of any of the tellers. And just by way of information, the tellers traditionally, in modern practice, there are 4, 2 each from the House and Senate, and 2 each from the Republican Party and Democratic Party, majority and minority parties anyway. And here's who they usually go to. We discussed the other day with Armando that I guess, like Mo Brooks should have been pushing to Kevin McCarthy to name one of his co-conspirators as a teller, so that there would be somebody up there who would agree to read one of the counterfeit certificates if they found a way to get it into their hands. They didn't, as far as I know, they haven't done it. And I guess they could diverge from tradition, but the tradition, just so you know, is that it is usually the chair and ranking members of the House Administration Committee. This falls under their jurisdiction, the counting of the votes. This is their show. So the chair and ranking member, in this case, the chair is Zoe Lofgren. Zoe Lofgren of California is the chair, and it is a guy by the name of Rodney Davis is the Republican ranking member on that committee. And also invited to serve as tellers are the chair and ranking member of the Senate Rules and Administration Committee. So basically the Senate Rules Committee sends their top 2. In this case, Roy Blunt and Amy Klobuchar, actually. So I took a look at how they did this just to find out, is there any traditional order in which they go, or can they switch up the order, or agree among themselves what the order will be. That I don't know for sure, but the electoral vote count in 2017 went this way, and my assumption is that this was, by tradition, the chair of the Senate committee goes first. Then the chair of the House committee goes second. Then the ranking member of the Senate committee. Then the ranking member of the House committee. So I guess they afford seniority to the Senate over the House in a joint session, or at least in this joint session, and then go by chair and then ranking member. So chair, ranking. And because at the moment the Senate is in Republican hands and the House is in Democratic hands, it ends up being Republican, Democrat, Democrat, Republican. I don't know if that makes any difference either. But they then hand out the certificates in alphabetical order. Alabama goes first. Second is Alaska. And third is Arizona. That's the first of the states to, to send someone, or to produce a counterfeit certificate of some kind. Arizona, of course, being the looniest of the states, produced 2 counterfeited certificates. More on that in a moment. But if Arizona were somehow to get its certificates, one or the other or both, into the hands of the vice president, sitting as president of the Senate, who would hand it to a teller to read. Remember, the job at first of the teller is to read the little script that they give them and to examine the certificate and to say the certificate of the state, in this case of Arizona, appears to be regular in form and authentic, and it is evident hereby, I forget what the little phrase is, but it indicates that Arizona cast its, I forget how many there are, 11, that's right, 11 electoral votes for blah, 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 and they, read it out. In this case, it's Biden and Harris, of course. But the first job is to announce that this is the real deal. This certificate appears to be not only regular in form so that it will do the trick, it tells us who the electors are and how they voted, but authentic as well. Now, if you hand a certificate that says that Donald Trump won Arizona to the third teller, who in this case is Amy Klobuchar, and ask her to say that it looks like it's regular in form and authentic, she's not going to do it. She's just going to say, I bet if she gets 3 of them, she'll say, I've been handed 3 certificates here, and 2 of them do not appear to be regular in form or authentic, whereas 1 does. And the one that appears to be regular in form and authentic says that Arizona casts its 11 electoral votes for Joseph R. Biden of Delaware as president, and 11 votes for Kamala Harris of California as vice president. And then what? Then I guess somebody jumps up and objects. So it's not like making these certificates and slipping them into the hands of the vice president has any magical power. And even if they handed it to Roy Blunt or Rodney Davis, it wouldn't really be likely that they would just say, yeah, this is the real one either. I actually took a look around the internet to see if there was anything on Rodney Davis and how he viewed the outcome of the election, and I found what you needed in case you want to put any trust in what he told the newspapers. A Q&A with Representative Davis on Trump's denial of election loss. This from WGLT, the NPR station from Illinois State University. And Ryan Denham has a conversation with him in which I think he asks point blank, so what about this whole thing where Trump says he won? Do you buy that? And he says, no, not really. That's essentially it. Let's see. Where's I should have circled in some way where he answers the question point blank. But yeah, basically he does say in this thing, now I believe that when the electoral votes are cast and counted, it's going to be Biden who wins. That's the way it is. And he's not an anti-Trumper either. Davis was, as it says here, honorary co-chair for Trump's campaign in Illinois. So he's not anti-Trump. I guess here's the first question he's asked. What do you make of President Trump's continued insistence that he won the election? Well, he says, he has every right to make sure that every legal challenge that he and his team want to mount is made. Right? He has every right to wait until the Electoral College, which is the process our Constitution lays out that chooses the president, meets and chooses the president. And I fully anticipate, he then says, based on the results, the Electoral College will choose Joe Biden as the next president. But he does continue, this is an issue that the president is going to continue to pursue all legal options to make sure every vote that was legally cast and counted. So, kind of weak tea, but he does in the end come out and say the Electoral College will settle it and it'll be settled in favor of Biden. So, and it's not like he's a anti-Trumper either. So anyway, that's going to be real interesting if they try to slip people these certificates. But I don't believe that they will, and they'll probably just land themselves in more trouble if they do. I think instead you'll have Paul Gosar and others waving the Arizona certificates around saying, we have the real deal down here and you should come and get it. And I don't know but even if it never makes it into a teller's hands, it doesn't matter. They can still lodge their objections. So that's not necessary for them to do, but they may try and do it anyway. I told you there was more about this thing, though, and for that, I want to go to the Tucson Sentinel. And our break, though, is almost coming up, so I guess what I can do here is, maybe we'll speak our way through the headline here, and we'll tease it. Well, this will sort of give the game away, I guess. I'll tell you what it says here. Who is Hobbs? I better check this out. Secretary of State in Arizona. Secretary of State Katie Hobbs asks the Attorney General to investigate fake Trump electors for employing Arizona's state seal. Yes, I figured they should be able to get in trouble for something like this. Let's see if we can get the details when we return after this break. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Shall we read through this short article here? Hobbs asks AG to investigate fake Trump electors for employing Arizona's state seal. And I want to figure out which of the groups of fake electors it is. If it's only one, maybe both. A group of people who sent a slate of fake electoral votes for President Donald Trump to Washington, D.C. may be facing legal trouble for using the state seal without authorization. I would love to know exactly what that means and how they did it here. Secretary of State Katie Hobbs sent a cease and desist letter to Mesa resident Lori Osecki, one of the 11 fake electors. And here, I guess I'll clarify for you, the fake electors, the ones who were just the group of randos, I think, not the would-be Trump electors who actually could have been electors had Trump won Arizona. So they got a hold of the seal, or did they just Photoshop it? That's what I want to know. Anyway, a cease and desist letter to Lori Osecki, one of the 11 fake electors, demanding that her group no longer use Arizona's state seal. The state requires people to get the Secretary of State's permission to use, display, or otherwise employ any facsimile, copy, likeness, imitation, or other resemblance to the state seal, which Hobbs said the group didn't do. Oh, I see. I was like, well, then what are you bothering them for? I see. They didn't get the state's permission. That's what they didn't do. I mean, okay, good. And I guess this sort of answers the question. It wasn't like they broke in and stole the actual seal and used that on their paper. They just, I guess, scanned a picture of the state seal and put it on their forged document. Hobbs also referred the matter to the Attorney General's office for investigation. That seems necessary, I would say. Using the state seal without authorization is a Class 3 misdemeanor, which carries a maximum penalty of 30 days in jail and a $500 fine. And I guess back in the day you could end up in Sheriff Arpaio's jail, but I don't know where. What county is Mesa in? I'm not sure. Probably turn out to be like Mesa County or something like that. But are you curious? I don't know. Somehow I just need to find out. Mesa, Arizona's county is Maricopa. So the answer, I think, is he was Maricopa. The other big county is Pima County, right? So yeah, how about that? So if if only that were the case. I mean, I think it's a better trade-off that we don't have Arpaio as the Maricopa County sheriff, but that would be pretty funny. Although maybe he would treat her with kid gloves or give her a suite or something as opposed to parking her in a tent out in the desert. Anyway, Osecki and 10 others who identified themselves as, quote, the sovereign citizens, and I don't know if they mean that as the term of art or not, the sovereign citizens of the great state of Arizona sent signed notarized certificates, remember that they also had them notarized, to the National Archives, purporting to be electoral votes for Trump, despite the fact that former Vice President Joe Biden won Arizona by about 10,500 votes. They also sent a copy of their faux electoral votes to the Secretary of State's office. The state seal was on the cover sheet of the documents, as well as the top of each subsequent page. Now, good on them for following the instructions correctly. It doesn't say whether they also sent copies to all the other mandatory recipients, but one of them is the Secretary of State of the state whose electoral votes you're talking about. But, as they're pointing out here, the problem is that they sent the evidence of the crime to the person who knows that it's a crime and is allowed to press charges about that. They sent it right to the Secretary of State who would know right away whether or not these people had the permission that was necessary to use the state's seal. So they were stuck. If they wanted to comply with the statute, they had to do that. And they had to know this was coming, right? The state seal was on the cover sheet of the documents as well as at the top of each subsequent page. By affixing the state seal to documents containing false and misleading information about the results of Arizona's November 3rd, 2020 general election, you undermine the confidence in our democratic institutions, Hobbs wrote in her letter dated December 22nd. So there's that. There's a little bit more here, but I was thinking, do you need the state seal on every page? I don't think so. Well, it didn't look like that on the real document, I don't think, but maybe I'll check and take a look. Anyway, it says Osaki could not be reached for comment, so par for the course. The group cast its fake electoral votes as Trump supporters across the country rejected the results of the presidential election. Many Trump supporters, as well as the president himself, have falsely claimed the election was swayed by fraud and have spread baseless conspiracy theories and unsubstantiated claims, particularly about Biden's win in Arizona and 5 other swing states. Oseki and her cohorts were not the official Republican electors who were pledged to vote for Trump if the president had won Arizona in the 2020 general election. Arizona's official Republican electors, which includes several prominent GOP officials, submitted fake electoral votes of their own on December 14th. You may recall that this group of fakers are the ones who did it early and considered that to be beating the other fake team to the punch, and the real team, of course. But interesting that they chose to comply with the statute that says that a copy of their stupid certificate had to be sent to the Secretary of State, who could bust them on this thing, but didn't bother complying with the part that says that they were supposed to vote on December 14th. Can't have it all, I guess. The Arizona Republican Party said the votes would be sent to Congress, the ones from the official Republican electors anyway, where it hopes they will be counted as Arizona's official electoral votes on January 6th, when Congress will count and certify the votes of the Electoral College. And here, I don't know whether they truly think when they say we hope that they'll be counted as Arizona's official electoral votes, whether they mean we'll slip them into the pile and the tellers will announce them and just count them because they'll have forgotten that Biden won Arizona. I doubt that would happen, but that might not even be what they mean. Again, a lot of these states that sent counterfeit certificates aren't actually, hoping to fool the tellers or anybody else into believing that that's the genuine certificate. It's their hope that in objecting to the real electoral votes from Arizona and these other states, the two houses will agree to throw out the real certificates and then say, well, either these states don't get to vote, or we could vote to accept these fake certificates as real and count those instead, and then they would go and vote and do that. I mean, it's the longest of long shots. They'll never get past the vote of agreeing to the objection in the first place, which means that the official documents stand and will be accepted. And then after that, there's no room for any other documents. But even if they agreed to reject the documents that were genuine, there's no real reason to believe. I mean, I guess, except for the fact that if they were to vote to throw out the real ones, they might as well just go all the way and vote to accept the fake ones too. But it's a coin toss. I don't know whether they would actually do that. But anyway, that was their hope. Some Republicans believe that Congress can reject Biden electors and instead certify Trump as the winner of the election. The notion is widely rejected because both the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives and the Republican-controlled Senate would have to vote to reject a slate of electors. Were the votes of Arizona's Republican electors to somehow be counted, they would be deemed invalid under state law. Arizona is one of 33 states prohibiting faithless electors, a term for electors who cast their votes for candidates other than their state's winner. This is actually a ticklish question here for just a second. Anyway, if an Arizona elector casts a vote for someone besides the winner, his or her position would be immediately deemed vacant, and the chair of the political party representing the winner would choose the replacement. I say it's a weird and tough question because, well, it also jumps back and forth in time here just a little bit. So if were the votes of the Arizona's Republican electors to somehow be counted, they would be deemed invalid under state law, right? Okay. Because of their faithless elector law. But I wonder, for one thing, what the text of the faithless elector law actually says, and whether it says that electors must, when casting their votes as part of the Electoral College, vote for the candidate to whom they pledged their vote when they were first selected as potential electors. So in other words, the Republican electors, I don't know. I mean, depending on how the law is written, the Republican electors, in the view of the writer of the article, would be bound to vote if they somehow made it into the Electoral College for Joe Biden because Joe Biden won the state. But in winning the state, those Republican electors would not be electors. The Democratic potential electors would have become the electors, and they would be expected to vote for Joe Biden. The expectation of the Republican electors is that if they got a chance to vote in the Electoral College, they would vote for Donald Trump. It would be, I think, again, depending on how the law is written, it could be a violation of the law for a Trump elector to vote for anyone other than Trump. Except they would never have any opportunity to vote for anyone other than Trump because Trump would have to win the election for them to be an elector. So it's all a little bit convoluted. But I guess what they're saying is if somehow Congress became convinced that these guys were the electors, then I don't know, depending on how the law is written. If Arizona's law says that the people who show up as electors, however they get there, are bound to vote for the winner of the popular vote, regardless of, of which party that was and which party these electors are from, then I guess they could say you can't count our 11 votes as votes for Trump because state law requires they be counted as votes for Biden. But, and I guess they could put the Republican electors in some legal jeopardy. Although it'd be interesting to see how they plead, again, depending on how the stupid thing is written. So I don't know. I mean, this is really just an inapt discussion. This should never have been, or inapposite discussion. It should not have been brought up, and I think is a confusion of the issue. But it would be pretty interesting. I don't know. I guess if the only situation I can imagine in which a Republican elector would sit in for a Democratic elector when the Electoral College voted is if there was a vacancy in the Democratic ranks there, and for some reason, it says here that the chair of the political party representing the winner gets to choose a replacement. Why they would choose one of the Republican electors, I have no idea, except to test the state law. If I select you, does state law say you have to vote for Trump, or does state law say you have to vote for Biden? And you might be in trouble either way. Do you want the job? No. So I don't see it happening. I guess it is the open and shut case on that one. I don't know. What is the long and short of it is really what I wanted to say, but I had a different set of opposites in mind for some reason and said that one. Okay. Let's see. With that out of the way, where can we go next? I mentioned this one already. Here's another little piece of coronavirus news. One or two pieces here. One is word from a Republican official who tested positive for COVID-19 after attending the White House Hanukkah party, of all things. Interesting. It looked like that was, possibly a super spreader event. There's only the one right now that I know of. Who knows whether there's more? And he says, well, I didn't listen to the warnings. That is true. Sarah Polis wrote this up for The Hill. Let's find out who it is. A Massachusetts Republican leader who has COVID-19 says he most likely contracted it at the White House Hanukkah party on December 9th, according to local station WJAR. Tom Mountain. Does it ring a bell for any of you in Massachusetts? The vice chairman of the Massachusetts Republican State Committee. Hospitalized and almost put on a ventilator just a few days after attending the event. One of the 25 holiday parties thrown at the White House this month, according to the Washington Post. Of course, I mean last month. Wink, wink. Let's put it this way, he says. When I went down to Washington, D.C. for the White House Hanukkah party event, I was perfectly fine, Mountain told WJAR. And 3 days after that event, I was in a hospital, ready to be put on a life-saving ventilator. But I guess he somehow avoided the ventilator, and that's good news for him. Photos of Mountain from the gathering show him and many others around him without masks on. While masks were required while in line, many partygoers removed them upon entry, according to the Post. Interesting. People would just leisurely and gingerly take off their mask to mingle, to schmooze, Mountain told WJAR. I don't even think some people wore masks the entire time. And again, I was guilty as anyone else. I just wasn't wearing a mask. Mountain admits he hasn't been a fan of wearing a mask throughout the pandemic, but now is singing a different tune. Wear a mask, I guess is how that tune goes. Stay as far away from people as possible. He says both things. Mountain is urging others to heed the advice of health experts of social distancing. I didn't listen to the warnings of my own family, and now I'm paying the price, Mountain told the Boston Globe. Oh boy. Well, keep paying. There are others among this group. Let's see. Jumping back into Pocket, I know there are one or two more that I wanted to share with you. One was pretty entertaining. I think we talked about these guys at some point. Maybe. The Hill, Jordan Williams, reporting several attendees at Republican Club's viral holiday party test positive for COVID-19. Can you believe it? This is the Whitestone Republican Club of New York, in Queens, New York. We saw their video. I think we shared the story of them doing the conga line, leading a conga line around the party room, holding Trump flags. And this was the one where one of the people was interviewed and said, we're adults and we get to make our own decisions about our lives. And we wondered whether that was true about what they thought about other people and their decisions about say, marijuana legalization or abortion. Well, anyway, the new report is that at least 3 of the people who attended the Whitestone Republican Club's indoor holiday party in Queens that went viral have tested positive for COVID-19, according to the Queens Daily Eagle. The report comes 1 week after footage from the party went viral and showed maskless attendees joining a conga line as the person in front holds a Trump 2020 flag. At one point, Vicky Palladino, a Republican candidate for New York City Council, leads the dance. Among the attendees who tested positive was James Trent, chairman of the Queens Village Republican Club. He told the news outlet that he started experiencing symptoms 2 days after the party. Trent said he was admitted to the hospital and was expected to be released Thursday. He did not directly answer when the Eagle asked whether he regretted attending the party. He just says, it was a wonderful time and a great party, but I'm not happy I got sick. That's pretty direct. Another attendee and his wife tested positive after the event. 3 people familiar with the couple told the Eagle. That couple has not been identified. The Washington Post reported that at least 50 guests attended the party, even though New York prohibited gatherings of more than 10 people. The gathering, which took place at a restaurant, was held before New York Governor Andrew Cuomo halted indoor dining on December 14th. The club didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. And here was the adults have the absolute right to make their own decisions, and clearly many of us chose to interact like normal humans and not paranoid zombies in hazmat suits. The Facebook post from the club read, "This is for some reason controversial to the people who believe it's their job to tell us all what to do. And I told 3 of you to get COVID and you did it. So, I think you're sheep. But what can I tell you? That's your choice to become sheep. And I honor that choice." Let's see. Another coronavirus story, just to throw it in the mix here. Let's see. Was it, who sent me this one? I think I actually have it up on, we go. Our friend Twister Cat, who sends this news, this time from Yahoo News. Representative-elect Salazar, with whom I am unfamiliar, to miss swearing-in ceremony due to COVID diagnosis. So that's 2 Republican representatives-elect who will miss the swearing-in ceremony due to COVID-19. One is dead, Luke Letlow, and Congresswoman-elect Maria Elvira Salazar of Florida announced Thursday that she will miss the swearing-in ceremony for new members of Congress on Sunday in Washington after testing positive for the coronavirus. Salazar, a Republican from the Miami area who defeated Democratic Representative Donna Shalala in one of the biggest House upsets of the election year, was admitted to the hospital overnight on December 23rd with heart arrhythmia and later tested positive for COVID-19 on top of it all, according to a statement from her office. That's a bad combination, I would think. Salazar was treated and released, that's lucky, once she was in stable condition. Following guidance from medical professionals, Salazar's office said she would self-isolate at home for at least 14 days while she continues to recover. She goes on to say, "I hope that you can forgive me as I have been unable to communicate through social media, but I was diagnosed with COVID-19, she says on Twitter. To who? I don't know. "I am in quarantine at home and getting better each day. I look forward to hitting the ground running for my community once it is medically permissible." It's good of her to take the quarantine seriously, I guess. She probably should have done it earlier. Dozens of House and Senate members have tested positive for the coronavirus, and many more have been forced to quarantine after coming into close contact with infected people. On Tuesday, Congressman-elect Luke Letlow died from complications of COVID-19, and of course, so have 340,000 other Americans died from it. And sounds like she will, in the end, be okay. But we had a lot of rosy reports on Letlow as well, but at least we recognize that they didn't sound like they were really true, because they all involved him staying in the hospital. And here, Salazar appears to be out, if not out and about. So, okay. Other interesting aspect of the story they don't cover here is if the House goes on to adopt rules permitting remote voting during the continuance of the pandemic, will Congresswoman-elect Salazar be permitted to cast votes before she shows up and takes the oath and officially, in my view, joins the House? And I guess that would also help us settle the question, which actually we've settled in the past, of how important the taking of the oath actually is to determining whether or not you are a eligible voting member of the House or Senate. You may recall that stems from the wildly inappropriate but possibly still constitutional attempt to block the swearing in of the senators elected to the 116th Congress at the end of the Obama administration for the purposes of sending the Senate into an imbalance with a sufficiently large Democratic majority at that moment. That is to say, among the 2/3 of the senators whose terms were continuing and weren't newly reelected to their posts, to install Merrick Garland on the Supreme Court. Or I guess that would have been at the beginning of the 215th Congress, or I don't know. At any rate, in January 2017, lots of objections raised to that. But some among them was the idea that the oath wasn't actually important or impactful in any way in terms of determining whether or not their terms of service as senators or members of the House had begun. And I could find no precedent for people being allowed to participate in the debates or votes of either house without taking the oath first. And so I thought, actually, as it turns out, that argument is pretty weak. It seems like the oath is kind of a key part of joining the body as a full-fledged member. But I guess this is another way of testing it. I don't know whether she'll even ask for that to be allowed or not. Although I suppose once they adopt new rules about remote voting, it's possible that they could swear her in remotely. I don't know whether the rules cover that. We'll have to look into it sometime, and I will probably forget before I actually do that. But if I do, and anyone reminds me, I will say I'll do it and then forget that second time. Just kind of forewarning there. We might find out one day, though. No promises. Okay, one more quick hit that I think I can sneak in under the wire here. The president's pardon power may be weaker than it seems. An argument here in the New York Times on December 5th by Martin Reddish, a constitutional law professor at Northwestern. Begins here, and I think it may have been published before Roger Stone got his pardon, but it mentions here Stone, Trump's longtime confidant, was recently convicted of 7 counts of criminal behavior. Other associates of Trump's were previously convicted of other crimes, and under the pardon power granted by the Constitution, Trump could pardon all of them at any point during his term in office, which is now dwindling to a close. With one important exception, the president's power to pardon for violation of federal laws is unqualified. And we really should just get right down to this part here. It is the president could exercise the pardon power, quote, except in cases of impeachment. In its narrowest form, both textually and historically, this means that the president cannot pardon an executive or judicial officer, including himself, from impeachment conviction. But perhaps this doesn't go far enough, for the president is capable of undermining the impeachment check in indirect but equally dangerous ways. Imagine the following situation. The House of Representatives conducts an impeachment investigation into the president. A House committee subpoenas witnesses to provide damaging evidence. What if the president, any president, were secretly to suggest to these witnesses, as this one did, that he will pardon them if they are convicted of contempt for refusing to testify or for committing perjury while testifying? Under a strict reading, the use of the pardon power in this context would be constitutionally authorized. The president would not be overturning an impeachment conviction. In this manner, the president could undermine impeachment by inducing witnesses to perjure themselves, as he did. This practice would go far to achieve the result the framers most feared, unchecked power in the hands of the executive. Of course, courts would presumably still enforce separation of powers, and the president would still be subject to an electoral check, but nevertheless, a president effectively freed from the check of impeachment would represent a dangerous alteration in the balance of governmental power. Presidential suborning of perjury is itself most likely an impeachable offense, but the impeachment remedy for such presidential misdeeds may well prove to be insufficient for checking a president's guerrilla warfare in the impeachment process. For example, what if Congress is unable to unearth persuasive evidence of such behavior, even though it actually took place? Or what if the president preemptively pardons perjuring witnesses as a means of stopping any investigation into their behavior? What if witnesses friendly to the president choose to perjure themselves, assuming that the president will pardon them? In other words, even the mere possibility of a presidential pardon in such situation presents a serious threat to the effective use of the impeachment power. It is reasonable, then, to find presidential pardons of witnesses in an impeachment proceeding automatically invalid. How about that? Do you like that one? Otherwise, exercise of the pardon power seriously threatens the effective use of the impeachment power as a constitutional check. The obvious means of avoiding such a troubling situation is to establish a prophylactic barrier to presidential pardon of any impeachment witnesses convicted of perjury or contempt. Can the Constitution be construed as establishing such a barrier? The answer is yes. If we choose to construe the pardon power's impeachment exception to prohibit not only presidential pardons of impeachment convictions, but also pardons of those convicted of criminal undermining of the impeachment process. Is this expansion of the impeachment qualification on the pardon power consistent with the framers' understanding? Technically, perhaps not. Though slavish adherence to the framers' understanding has by no means always limited modern constitutional interpretation. Indeed, much of modern constitutional law has evolved without concern for what the framers did or did not intend. It is also important to note that this reading of the pardon powers impeachment exception is linguistically consistent with the text, except in cases of impeachment. Arguably refers to any crime related to the impeachment, as much as it does to the narrow conviction. This relatively expansive reading of the impeachment exception better fulfills the framers' goals in adopting the impeachment exception to the pardon power in the first place, to prevent the president from undermining the impeachment power's check of abuse of political or judicial authority.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show with David Waldman.
Well, there's a finishing flourish here from Justice Joseph's story that ties the whole thing up. I encourage you to read it on your own. I think that really gives you the gist of what the article is about. How's that for a Happy New Year present, then? Hang on to that one and see if you can convince your friends and neighbors that all of these pardons are in fact invalid. See you tomorrow.